All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning year. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsor for the month of Iyar. Anonymous sponsorship with Akara Satov to Hashem for all of the blessings He has bestowed upon us, and for Shlema for Devora Leah Bas Chaya Rivka. May we all be Zochim Eretz Hashem to witness the imminent coming of Mashiach Meher Rabbi Yameinu. Amen. To thank our week of learning sponsors, Shmuel and Rabbi Karapkin, in commemoration of Shmuel's father's yard site, Mr. Leonard Karapkin, Lipa ben Yecheskel HaKohen, and Ari and Haley Lichterman in memory of Haley's mother, Linda Kotin Zichron Livracha. We hope that on the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshamas will have an Aliyah and the family's Ein Nechama. And our day of learning sponsor for today, Alan and Sherry Steinmetz, with Akara Satov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and a Mazel Tov to their children, Allison and Adam Steinmetz, on the birth of Chaya. Well, so with that, let us begin. Baruch Hashem, beautiful way to begin the week with all the Mazel Tovs. Let's begin. Today's daf is Pei Beis 82, and we are picking up on Pei Aleph Amud Beis 81b. We left off at the two dots, a little bit further down the middle of the page. Shmar li va'amar la hanach lefanai shomer chinam. So we have a couple of really interesting cases today. So case number one is the following situation. Reuven goes over to Shimon, and Reuven says to Shimon, do me a favor and watch my object. Shimon says, no problem, hanach lefanai. Put it down in front of me. So what's Shimon's status? So the Mishnah said, Shomer Chinam. He's a Shomer Chinam, he's an unpaid custodian. So the Gemara says as follows, let's analyze. Amar Afuna. So this is a very interesting sugya, because here we're getting into discussions about, again, someone tells you just to put down their stuff in front of you in your domain. What's your responsibility vis-a-vis that item? So here we go. So Amar Afuna. Amar lo hanach lefanecha. So the Mishnah says like this, one more time. Reuven goes over to Shimon. Reuven says to Shimon, Shimon, will you watch my object? Shimon says, yeah, put it down in front of me. What's Shimon's liability? What's his responsibility? Ultimately, again, shomer chinam. He is an unpaid custodian. Okay, so now comes along Rafuna. Rafuna says like this. Amarlo, hanach lefanecha. Let's say again, Reuven says to Shimon, Shimon, will you watch my object? And Shimon says, put it down in front of you. Hanach lefanecha. Sure, just put it down in front of you. What's the halacha? Ein lo shomer chinam v'lo shomer sachar. So Rabbosai, in that case, Shimon is neither a paid custodian or an unpaid custodian. Neither a shomer chinam nor a shomer sachar. Meaning what? That when someone tells you to put something down in front of you, what are they effectively saying? I'm not taking care of it. In other words, you take care of it. So the lashon of hanach lefanecha. So just to point out, hanach lefanai, put it down in front of me, means I'm accepting responsibility as a shomer chinam. Hanach lefanecha, put it down in front of you, essentially means I'm not taking any responsibility over it. The Gemara says as follows: Ibailuhu hanach stama mai. Okay. What happens if there's an unqualified hanach? Right? Reuven says to Shimon, Shimon, will you watch my object? And Shimon says, put it down. Put it down. So what is that? So the Gemara says, Tashma, Shamar li, v'amar lo hanach lefanai, shomer chinam. Well, let's infer from the Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? Reuven says to Shimon, watch my object. Shimon says, put it down in front of me. That makes Shimon a shomer chinam. Hastama v'lo klum. You could infer from that just hanach, put it down without a qualifier, is zero acceptance of responsibility. So the Gemara says, Adrabah, I can say just the opposite. Hanach lefanecha hu de'ein lo shomer chinam v'lo shomer zachar, hastama shomer chinam. I can make the opposite inference. What was the other case? What was I? The other case was, Reuven says to Shimon, watch my object, and Shimon says to Reuven, put it down in front of you. So put it down in front of you, what do we understand? Shimon is not accepting any responsibility. So I will say what you can infer from that is hanach, just put it down stam, maybe is the assumption of basic responsibility of a shomer chinam. To which the Gemara says, you're right, Ella, mehad leka l'mash mamine. So I will say I can't really resolve this from the Mishnah. So in other words, we can't bring a conclusive proof from the inference of the Mishnah, so we have to look elsewhere. So we'll say, just to understand where we're up to right now. Here's what I know. Right? Reuven says to Shimon, watch my stuff. Shimon says, hanach lefanai, put it down in front of me. put it down in front of me means he's a shomer chinam. By the way, say, what would make him a shomer sachar? What would make him a shomer sachar? What would make him a shomer sachar is if Shimon would say, Ruvain, give it to me. Right? If Shimon were to take it, then again, not totally, but potentially, I'll make him a shomer zachar. But the lashon of hanach lefanai, put it down in front of me. That's definitely shomer chinam. Hanach lefanecha, put it down in front of you. That's zero assumption of responsibility. Our shaila is hanach, put it down. So maybe it's machlokes tanaim. Here we go. Im hechnis b'rshus balachas v'chayv. So we'll say now, interesting case over here. So Rabbi says, so what happens? Reuven goes into Shimon's field, right? And in Shimon's field, either let's say Reuven brings his ox, and his ox is damaged, or Reuven puts down his utensils in Shimon's field, and they're damaged. So now damage happens to Reuven in Shimon's property. So what's going to be the shaila? The shaila is going to be, what level of responsibility does Shimon have for damages that Reuven incurred in his property? So the Gemara says it's not as simple. If ultimately, again, Reuven entered into Shimon's rishus, he entered into Shimon's domain with Shimon's permission, then Baal Chatzor Chayiv. Then Shimon's going to be Chayiv. Shimon's going to be Chayiv. So we'll say, so the logic of the Tanna Kama seems to be like this. When you invite someone into your property, that comes with what? Full assumption of responsibility for the welfare and safety of that person and their property. So in other words, also what that means is when you give permission, again, when you give a person permission for something, you're taking responsibility for that individual. That's the Tanna Kama. Rebbe says. Now, by the way, if you look at Rashi says over here, Im hichnis birshus. It's towards the further up on the page in Rashi, probably about 10 lines down in the short lines. Im hichnis birshus, mishnehi beperek shor shenagach hasapara bekedar shehichnis kiderosav. So Reuven is a potter, and Reuven brings in his pots, right? V'shavran shoro shal balabayis. And when Reuven is in Shimon's domain, Shimon's shar goes ahead and damages Reuven's property. O hichnis shoro v'nagcho shor shabalabayis, or for that matter, again, Reuven brought his shar into the domain into Shimon's chatzar, and Shimon's shor gored Reuven's shor. O sheilins perosa v'achad v'hem fine. Bal chatzar chayiv, Rashi says, benisko dichi amrle all v'inter lecha ka'amrle v'adin hanach stama b'shuk. So say, when Shimon says to Reuven, come in, the way the Tanna Kama is understanding that is, Shimon takes full responsibility. And therefore, again, if Reuven is damaged, Reuven's ox is damaged, Shimon is going to be fully liable. And Rabbi says, so just to keep everything together, according to this approach, when Reuven goes over to Shimon and Reuven says, Shimon, watch my object, and Shimon says, Hanach, put it down, that would be the same thing. That would be the same thing as saying, enter my property. Full assumption of responsibility. Rabbi on the other hand says, Bekulam eno chayiv ad sheyekabel alav balabayis l'shomro. Rabbi says no. Rabbi says that an invitation to enter is not the same as assumption of responsibility. That again, when Reuven says to Shimon, can I come into your field? And Shimon says yes, Shimon is essentially saying what? Enter at your own risk. I'm not assuming any responsibility. And in fact, Shimon doesn't assume any responsibility unless he explicitly does so. Look at Rashi. Rabbi Omer bekulan aynu chayiv de'al v'tiv unatu lecha ka'amrlei v'adin lahanach stama b'shuk. So the Gemara says, fine. So Rabbi Omer bekulan aynu chayiv good aynu ashi kabbalah ba'bayis lishmar. So Gemara says, both says, here's what the Gemara suggesting. Maybe the machlokes over between Rabbi and the Tanna Kama, who we're going to identify as Rabbi Meir, maybe the machlokes over here is the same machlokes as before. So the Tanna Kama says like this: when you invite someone in, inviting in comes with full assumption of responsibility. So Reuven comes to Shimon, can I come into your field? Shimon says yes. Permission to enter means full responsibility. Similarly, Hanach, right? If Reuven goes over to Shimon, can I give you my object to watch? And Shimon says, put it down. Put it down means full assumption of responsibility. Rebbe, and permission to enter means enter at your own risk. The Balabayas Shimon doesn't take responsibility unless, of course, he explicitly articulates assumption of responsibility. So too, when Reuven goes over to Shimon and says, Shimon, will you watch my object? And Shimon says, put it down. Put it down means what? Put it down means put it down. You can feel free to put it down, but that's about it. I'm not assuming any level of responsibility. So the Gemara is suggesting that these two machloksim are aligned. To which the Gemara says, maybe not. Mimai. Dilma ad kano kami rabbanon hasam ela b'chatzar debasn turihi. Should I both say, maybe it's different. When, in the case of the chatzar, right, where Reuven goes over to Shimon's house, and Shimon gives Reuven permission to enter. The reason why, according to the Rabbanan, we assume that permission for entry comes with full responsibility, right, that Shimon takes full responsibility for Reuven, is because a chatzar, by definition, is a guarded area. Basnaturihi. And therefore, when Shimon says to Reuven, come in, the invitation comes with the assumption of responsibility for safety. In other words, a chatzar by definition is a private area. So when you invite someone into a private area, it's normal to assume that they're guaranteeing or they're allowing not just for your entry, but also for your safety and the safety of your property as well that enters along with you. Avahacha shukalav barnaturihu. I will say, but again, in the case, right, when Reuven is coming over to Shimon in the shuk, and he's saying to Shimon, "What can you watch my stuff?" And Shimon says, "Put it down." So the Gemara says, "Anach v'tiv natra lecha ka'amrale." Shimon's saying, "Look, this is the shuk, right? This is the marketplace. So at the end of the day." What he says is, you could put it down, but I can't take any responsibility for that. You're going to really have to oversee that object. So the Gemara says, Inam, the other possibility is, Ad kamo kamer Rabbi Hasam ela bechatzero dile ayule reshusa kabai lemishkal minei. So I will say furthermore, Rebbe only espoused his shita by the case of the chatzar. Why? You can't enter into someone's property without their permission. So therefore, when Reuven asks Shimon for permission to enter, so what's the halacha? V'chi yav le reshusa le'ayule tiv v'natar lecha ka'amar le. So I will say, so ultimately, again, when Shimon gives Reuven permission to enter, that means, sure, you can enter. I'm giving you permission to enter, but I'm not giving you any more. I'm not giving you any more than that. So feel free to come in. When it comes to your own property, you need to guard your own property. Aval hacha anach va'ana mintura kamar. But in the shuk, it must be that when Shimon says to Reuven, put your object down, that Shimon is assuming responsibility. Why? The isa daitka hanach v'tev v'natar ka'amar le ila osva reshusa baila mishkal minei. It's the shuk, it's private property. Public property. So because it's public property, so remember again, Reuven doesn't need Shimon's permission to put down his stuff in the shuk. So therefore, again, when Reuven says to Shimon, will you watch my stuff? Right? And Shimon says, Hanach. So what is that? That's not Shimon giving Reuven permission to put down his item in the shuk. Why? Because Reuven doesn't need Shimon's permission to put his stuff down in the shuk. It's public property. So therefore, we interpret Shimon's Hanach as put it down, and I'll assume responsibility. Okay, so I'll say, so that's the end of the sugya. We don't really have any clarity over here. I mean, we have clarity. Here's what I know, right? Let's work backwards. I know that when Reuven says to Shimon, can you watch my object? And Shimon says, Hanach lefanecha, put it down in front of you. What does put it down in front of you mean? No assumption of responsibility. That I know. I also know that when Reuven says to Shimon, watch my object, and Shimon says, Hanach lefanai, put it down in front of me, shomer chinam, unpaid custodian. What I don't know is what is the status of Hanach. Just put it down. So both say, so the Rambam asks, this is in Hilchos Schirus Parak Beis Halachas. There's a lot in here, but I'll just get to he says, Ha'omer lechaber shmar li zeh. So Reuven goes over to Shimon, can you please watch my object? V'amar lo Hanach lefanai. And Shimon says to Reuven, put it down in front of me, zeh shomer chinam. Beautiful, unpaid custodian. That's exactly what we saw in the Mishnah. Fantastic. Amar lo Hanach lefanecha, o Hanach stam, o sha'amar lo hari habayis lefanecha, eino lo shomer chinam, v'lo shomer sachar. So Shabbos says, now listen to this. So the Rambam says, if Reuven goes over to Shimon, watch my object, and Shimon says, put it down in front of you, or Shimon just says, put it down, or Shimon says, here, the house is open to you, which is another way of saying, just do whatever you want. In all of those cases, there is zero assumption of responsibility by Shimon. Now what's interesting is, even though there's zero responsibility, the Rambam says it's not good. It's not good. The Rambam points out, it's not good to enter into a situation of perceived responsibility, which is interesting, right? Which makes a lot of sense. But that's the halacha. Halacha ma'isa, hanach lefanai, shomer chinam, hanach lefanecha, or hanach stam, no assumption of responsibility. Incredible. Let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, hilval ala mashkon, shomer sacher. Next. So I'll say, so remember again, it's an interesting case. If you lend someone money, right, and the loan is secured by collateral, that's hilva ala mashkon. So again, remember again, what is the status of the creditor to the collateral? Right? So Ruvain lends Shimon $10,000. Shimon gives Ruvain mashkan, collateral. So now, what is Ruvain's relationship to that collateral? So the Mishnah says he's a shomer sacher. He's considered to be a paid custodian. So again, right, because it makes sense, since again, I will say what we saw already in yesterday's daf is that wherever there is some benefit associated with the mashkon, right? So then halacha l'maisa, you're considered to be a shomer sacher. So in this case over here, remember again, the benefit that Ruvain has is that the mashkon secures his debt, his repayment. As such, he's considered to be a shomer sacher. Okay, so let's analyze. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Eliezer. Our Mishnah does not reflect the view of Rabbi Eliezer. Why not? The Sanya, very interesting case. Hamal ve'es chavera ala mashkon. So we'll say, Ruvain lends Shimon $10,000, and it's secured by collateral. Va'avad ha'mashkon. And we'll say, now what happens if Ruvain loses the collateral? What's the halacha? Yishava. So again, Ruvain has to take a shvuah. He has to swear. He has to swear that he was not negligent, that there was no pshia. V'yitama osav divrei Rabbi Eliezer. He swears that he was not negligent, and I will say after that oath, he is entitled to repayment of his debt. This is Rabbi Eliezer. I will say, take a look at Rashi. Yishava shelo pasha de shomer chinam hu alav de'ein adam notal mashkon legavayna. Elilios patuach b'ma'osav shelo yuchal lichbar uli olam shomer chinam hu alav shem avad yigba mimakom acher. So this is incredible. Rabbi Eliezer says like this. Let's work backwards, right? Well, actually, let's work forwards. Rabbi Eliezer says like this. Ruvain lent Shimon $10,000. Shimon gave Ruvain collateral. Now Ruvain lost the collateral. So what's the halacha? He goes to Beis Din. He swears that he was not negligent. And now what's the halacha? He's entitled to go ahead and collect the money, collect his debt. What does that show you? According to Rabbi Eliezer holds that halacha l'maisa, the creditor, Ruvain, is a shomer chinam on the collateral. Because let's remember again, a shomer chinam is pater as long as he's not pushed, as long as he's not negligent. So therefore halacha l'maisa, the creditor is considered to be a shomer chinam. Shomer chinam. Now what's the logic that he's a shomer chinam? So Rashi points out, according to Rabbi Eliezer, and we're going to get into this, a collateral is not looked at as a source of repayment. That's not the point of collateral. I will say, what's the point of collateral? The point of collateral is that the borrower should never be able to renege on the debt. That should he say, I didn't borrow any money from you. So again, creditor could say, you didn't borrow any money from me. So how was your, whatever it is, how was your object in my possession? So it serves really primarily as a proof of debt. It's not looked at as a source of repayment, and therefore halacha l'maisa, creditor is considered to be a shomer chinam. That's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Kiva says, Yochel lomar lo klom helvisani ela ala mashkon. Avad amashkon, avad ma'osecha. So Rabbi Akiva says that the borrower could say, what are you talking about? Right? This collateral was to be a source of repayment. The only reason you lent me the money was because of the collateral. Therefore, if you lost the collateral, I'm sorry, you lost the debt. Take a look at Rashi. Actually, no, not yet. Sorry. So I'll say, so again, so fundamental machlokes over. So which means, so again, you lost the collateral. Rabbi Eliezer says, okay, you lost the collateral. Swear that you are not poshea, you are not negligent, and you could collect the debt. Shomer chinam. Rabbi Akiva says, what are you talking about? The entire debt is made based on the collateral. That's the whole chap of collateral. Collateral is not just the proof that a loan occurred. Collateral is a source of payment. So therefore, again, if you lose the collateral, you lose the right to collect the debt. Okay, so we'll say, now watch this. Aval, but this qualification, Aval hilvo elav zuz b'shtar v'yiniach lo mashkon alehen. We'll say, what happens if Ruvain lent Shimon $10,000, but again, the debt is recorded in a document. Divrei hakol avad hamashkon avdu ma'osav. Everyone agrees that if you lose the collateral, you lost the money. Now we'll say, now what's the chap? Because where there is a shtar, where there is a document, then what? Then I don't need the collateral to serve as a proof that the loan occurred. See, I remember again, going back in Rashi before, the whole chap of Rabbi Eliezer, the reason why he said you're a shomer chinam on the mashkon is because he didn't look at the mashkon as a source of payment, right? Rather, again, he looked at the mashkon as a source of proof. This mashkon proves that a loan occurred. Therefore, the Gemara says, if you have a loan document, which is, in and of itself, the proof that the loan occurred, therefore, the only reason for a mashkon is what? Is as source of repayment. And therefore, in that case, if you lose the mashkon, so again, creditor loses the ability to go ahead and get repaid. Look at Rashi. Aval hival alav zuz b'shtar v'niach lo mashkon alayim divrei kol avdu mos. Rashi says the hamashkon vada lego vayin l'shakal, because it's clear that Yermos in that case the mashkon was not being utilized as a proof, right? It wasn't the proof that the loan occurred. Rather, it was a source of repayment. The stam shtar yesh bo shibud karkos. Ve'esh lo mehechan ligvos. Ubatuach hu v'gam lichpar eni yachal da hakai shtara hilchach lav lizikaron dvarim nakte. So it's incredible. So what's going on over here? So says the Gemara. Shabbos says, so the point over here, what do you begin to see over here? You begin to see over here that halacha l'maisa, again, the Mishnah made it sound like so pashut that if you write Reuven lent Shimon $10,000, Shimon gets collateral that he's called a shomer sachar. The point the Gemara is making over here is that halacha l'maisa sees a machlokes, right? The Gemara says over here that obviously our Mishnah doesn't reflect the view of Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer holds that you're a shomer chinam on collateral. That's all the Gemara is just bringing up over here. You made it sound like a say anytime, in general, anytime in life you make a statement that seems simple that everyone agrees with, right? You have to be careful with statements like that, because there are not too many things in life that everyone agrees with. So therefore, again, the Mishnah says, when you have collateral, you are a shomer sachar on that collateral. The Gemara says, hold up. Not everyone agrees with that statement. Rabbi Eliezer is on record as saying that you are only a shomer chinam on collateral. That's all that's happening over here. Says the Gemara, afilu tema Rabbi Eliezer. The truth is, our Mishnah could even reflect the view of Rabbi Eliezer. How so? V'lo kasha, it's not a contradiction. Kan shemashkana b'shas hava aso. Kan shemashkana shelo b'shas hava aso. We'll say, very interesting. Maybe the creditor's relationship to collateral depends on when he's receiving the collateral. Isn't this interesting? In other words, I will say, watch this. When you receive collateral, look at Rashi just a moment. Also Rashi says, okay, watch this. Let's say, maybe like this. Maybe when you get collateral at the time the loan was made, that collateral is looked at as proof of transaction. Proof of transaction. In other words, it's almost like another field. So we'll say, even if you're lending with a document, again, if you're the creditor, right, the thing you're scared about most nervous about, is the borrower not just simply defaulting, because we'll say, in default, you still have certain remedies, right? You have liens against property. What you're most concerned about is the borrower saying, "Lo hayu dvarim me'olam." This never happened. So therefore, when there is collateral given at the time of the transaction, that collateral is looked at as a proof of transaction, versus collateral that is taken after the transaction has already been made. Now, I will say, why would collateral be taken after the transaction has already been made? Remember again, Reuven goes over to Shimon, asks him for repayment. Shimon says, I'm so sorry, I don't have the cash. But here, take this. I'm trying to get together the cash, but he gives him collateral, or again, during the duration of the transaction, at the end of the transaction, at the end of the loan term. So the Gemara says, this is very interesting. The Gemara says that maybe, when does Rabbi Eliezer say that you're a shomer chinam on collateral, that's when collateral is given at the time the loan is made. Because that collateral is looked at as proof of transaction. But when collateral is taken sometime during the duration of the loan, that's looked at as an alternate form of repayment. And on that, you're a shomer sachar. On that, you're Shomer Sachar. And therefore, again, I will say, it's not a contradiction. When the Mishnah says that you're a Shomer Sachar on collateral, what is that referring to? Collateral taken during the duration of the loan. And when Rabbi Eliezer said that you are a Shomer Chinam on collateral, when is that collateral taken? At the time that the loan was made. Beautiful. Beautiful. The Gemara says the only problem, it sounds so great, there's only one problem. Edi v'idi was the top of Pebez, edi v'idi hava ala mashkon katani. Let's say here's the problem. In both places, our Mishnah and Rabbi Eliezer's statement, the lashon is hilvo ala mashkon. Literally, again, he lent him on the collateral, which makes it sound like that what? That collateral is being given at the time of the loan itself. Okay, so we have to scrap that. Elalo kasha, kan shalvo mos, kan shalvo peros. So this is very interesting. Maybe the difference in relationship to mashkon, in other words, is the lender a shomer sachar, like the Mishnah says, or is the lender, is the lender a shomer sachar on the collateral, or is the lender a shomer china, like Rabbi Eliezer said? Maybe that's dependent on what's being loaned. In other words, maybe it's a distinction between lending money versus lending produce. Silber say when you lend money, so the truth is you're lending money and you're getting back money. In that kind of case, the collateral really serves as a proof to the debt, and therefore you're a shomer chinam. When you lend produce, it's actually very interesting. When you lend produce, what's the benefit of lending produce? Watch this. Obviously will say you're only lending produce if what? Ruvain is lending produce to Shimon. Ruvain is only lending produce to Shimon if he has surplus. Right? If he has surplus, then I will say, there's two options you can do with surplus produce. Number one, what can you do? Lend it, sell it, right? Or eat it. Now, if you have surplus, you're not going to eat it. So what's going to happen to it? It's going to rot. Which means that, interestingly enough, the lender gets a benefit from going ahead and lending out surplus produce, because otherwise it would have rotted. I would say that benefit that he has in the inherent transaction makes him a shomer sachar on the collateral. So the Gemara suggests maybe that's the difference. Maybe when the Mishnah says that you're a shomer sachar, lender is a shomer sachar on collateral, that's talking about a loan of produce, which would have rotted anyway, and therefore there's an inherent there's inherent benefit, right, for the lender in this transaction that makes him a shomer sachar on the collateral. Versus lending money, which again, as we saw in Ezo Neshech, is not really a winning proposal. I mean, Klape Shmaya in the world of Ruchnius, it's very winning, but in the world of Gashmius, it may not be as winning. So on that, you're a shomer chinam. Very interesting. V'hamidik tani seifa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer helva'o mos shomer chinam, helva'os peros shomer sachar. But here's the problem. In the seifa, Rabbi Yehuda himself makes that distinction between lending money versus lending produce. Mechlal de la Tanakama lo shanile. Which Rabbi say we could infer from that according to the Tanakama, he doesn't make that distinction. To which the Gemara says, okay, maybe Kuli Rabbi Hudahi, maybe the entire Mishnah actually reflects the view of Rabbi Huda, v'chisrei mechsera, v'hachi katani, and in reality, I will say there was a part of the narrative that is missing, and here's how you have to read it. Here we go. Hilvo al hamashkon shomer sachar. In general, if Ruvain lends Shimon something and Shimon gives Ruvain collateral, Ruvain the lender is a shomer sachar on the collateral. When is that so? Shilvo peros. That's when Ruvain lent Shimon produce. Aval hilvo mos. But what happens if Ruvain lent Shimon money? Then what's the halacha? Shomer chinam. Then in that case, Ruvain the lender is going to be a shomer chinam. Why? Rabbi Huda says hilvo mos shomer chinam, hilvo peros shomer sachar. If you lend money, you're a shomer chinam on the mashkon, and if you lend produce, you are a shomer sachar. Very interesting. Ihachi kamalei masisin del Rabbi Akiva. I will say if that's the case, then lemaisa, you have set up the Mishnah as not being like Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara says, "Ela mechabarta maslisin delo Rabbi Eliezer." So say if we have a choice between aligning the Mishnah like Rabbi Akiva or like Rabbi Eliezer, we'd rather go with Rabbi Akiva. So therefore, the Gemara says it could just very well be that halacha lemaisa, the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Eliezer. See, I just want to show you what happened over here, right? So the Mishnah made a statement. What was the Mishnah statement? That a lender is a shomer sachar on collateral. That was the Mishnah statement. The Gemara then introduced the Braisa of Rabbi Eliezer, and according to Rabbi Eliezer, you saw that what? That a lender is a shomer chinam on collateral. So Rabbi says, so now we've spent this entire time, right, the rest of Pei Aleph Amud Beis, the top of Pei Beis Amud Aleph, trying to do what? Reconciling those two shitos and showing that, no, Rabbi Eliezer could agree with the Mishnah. We did that in a variety of different ways. It's interesting, Rabbi said, that the Gemara comes full circle, and what's the full circle of the Gemara? Two opinions. Two opinions. There is a disagreement. The Mishnah holds that the lender is a shomer sachar, a paid custodian on collateral, and Rabbi Eliezer holds that you're shomer chinam. And both say it's two different opinions. I would say, by the way, what a tremendous Musar Haskell. Tremendous Musar Haskell. See, sometimes in the pursuit of shalom, so what we try to do is we try to align opinions, try to get people to agree. And of course, that's beautiful. If you could go ahead and get people on the same page and get them to agree, especially about major things in life, then that's fantastic. But one has to accept that in life, there are certain unbridgeable disagreements and differences. And I would say there are just going to be certain things that we don't agree on and will never agree on. Again, there's a machlokes between the Mishnah and Rabbi Eliezer. And the Gemara says it's not reconcilable. So what's the avodah in life? The avodah in life is to learn how to have shalom even with irreconcilable differences. Can you live on the same page, right? Can you live on the same page of Gemara even with irreconcilable differences? Rabbi saying it's the key to achdus in everything, specifically in Klal Yisrael. Rabbi saying, you think about this, in Klal Yisrael, there are going to be certain disagreements there's never going to be resolution. Right? You think about the different streams that exist within Judaism. I'll say there are certain irreconcilable differences. So, right, certain things that we are never going to agree with. We may hold Shabbos looks a certain way, Kashrus looks a certain way, right? Jewish identity looks a certain, and we're never going to agree. We're never going to agree on differences in that. But yet, I will say sometimes one just has to go ahead and accept that there are going to be differences of opinions, and even within our own community, differences of opinion, and halacha l'mais, but how do you still coexist? The beauty of this, I will say, not to compare that to the machlokes of our Mishnah and Rabbi Eliezer, but it is beautiful that you could have an irreconcilable difference, yet they both live on Bava Metzia, Pei Beis Amud Aleph. They both live on the same page. You could live side by side. You could have shalom. You could have achdus, even when there is no way to bridge the disagreements. Incredible yisod. Leima b'dalosh shavi mashkin shir zuzi b'dishwel kamivker. We'll say, so now this is great. Marcus introduces, maybe there's another issue. Maybe there's another issue at play. And maybe what's happening over here is, maybe the machlok is in the following case, where the mashkon is not worth the value of the debt. So you're both say, this is an interesting idea in mashkon in general, right? Is collateral, how does collateral work? And okay, so watch this. What happens if you have mashkon that is not worth the value of the debt? And I both say they're arguing the sheet of Shmuel. Okay, what Shmuel say? Da'amar Shmuel, Hayman da osfe alpha zuz lechavre. Watch this. So Ruvain lent 1,000 zuz to Shimon. Fa'anach leikata demagla iluya. And what happens? And Shimon gave Ruvain an axe handle as collateral. I was saying, now obviously, an axe handle is not worth 1,000 zuz. I mean, if it's made out of gold, maybe, right? But Lamaisa, it's just a plain old axe handle. So he's giving him collateral, but the collateral is not worth the value of the debt. What's the halacha? Avad kata demagla of the alpha zuze. If, it's pretty big, right? If Ruvain the lender loses the axe handle, he's lost the entire entitlement to his debt. So I'll say, so this is the position of Shmuel. So the Gemara says, Ibadalo shavi shir zuze. So the Gemara says, so maybe that's what their machlokes is. Maybe at the end of the day, that's what they are arguing. So what the Gemara is suggesting over here, the machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva is in Shmuel. To which the Gemara says, Ibadalo shavi mashkon shir zuzi. Now, if the mashkon is not worth the value of the debt, the kuli ama lesle de Shmuel. I will say, no, everyone agrees that in a case where the collateral is not worth the value of the loan, everyone rejects Shmuel's opinion. In other words, no one's going to say, I will say, that if you got the axe handle that's worth 5 zuz, and you lent 1,000 zuz, if you lost the axe handle, that you lost the debt. No one's going to say that. The Gemara says, rather, what's v'hacha b'dishavi shir zuzeh. In fact, the machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva could be where actually the collateral is worth the value of the debt. The kamiflagi b'd Rabbi Yitzchak. And they're arguing Rabbi Yitzchak. What did Rabbi Yitzchak say? Rabbi Yitzchak, minay l'bal chov shekona mashkon. From where do we know that a bal chov, that a debtor, that a creditor acquires the mashkon. So we'll say it's very interesting. How do we know that a creditor acquires the collateral? So the Gemara said, we'll say, so this is very, actually, in other words, what the Gemara is suggesting over here, we'll say, is that maybe there's something even more than being a shomer sachar, right? The Mishnah wanted to say that the creditor is a shomer sachar on the collateral. Maybe he's even something more than a shomer sachar. Shene'emar, because the pasuk says, "Ulecha tiet tzedakah." So we'll say this is actually incredible. So the halacha is, now, just to give you the context. The context over here is as follows: Ruvain lent Shimon money. He lent him $1,000. And what happens? And Shimon is poor. So what did Shimon give? What did Shimon give Ruvain as his collateral? His pajamas. So Shimon gave Ruvain his pajamas as collateral. So what does the Torah say? Torah says that every night you have to give Shimon back his pajamas so he could use them at night, and then the next morning he's going to give them back to you. That's the halacha. That's the halacha. So the Gemara says, and the pasuk says, "Ulecha tiet tzedakah." And when you lender do this, this is an act of tzedakah. An act of kindness and charity. The Gemara says, "Im eina kona mashkon tzedakah minali." And I will say, now the fact that this calls this an act of tzedakah by the lender indicates to us what? That technically speaking, he doesn't have to do it. In other words, because the mashkon is his. So because the mashkon is his, if I'm the lender, the mashkon is mine, I don't have to give it back. I'm sorry, Shimon, I don't have another pair of pajamas. I'm sorry. Not my problem. So the Gemara says, the fact that as a lender, you still do this, ulecha tiet tzedakah. That shows me that what? That ultimately, again, the object, in this case the collateral, is owned by the lender. Maybe that's the machlokes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Furthermore, again, maybe Rabbi Yitzchak is only talking about a case, most like we saw before, of a mashkon, of collateral that was given not at the time of the debt, that was taken later on. But how do you know that it's referring to a mashkon given at the time of the loan? Maybe a mashkon given at the time of the loan is, as we said before, just proof of debt and doesn't necessarily become the property of the lender. Ella mashkono shelo b'shas halva also kuli alma islay Rabbi Yitzchak. Rather, I will say when the mashkon was not given at the time the debt was made, rather during some other time where collection was attempted, everyone agrees with Rabbi Yitzchak that the lender acquires the mashkon. V'hacha b'mashkona b'shas halva also or b'shomer aveda kanifligi. All right, I will say. So rather, what are we arguing about over here? Rather, we're talking about over here. Maybe the machlokes is as follows: where mashkon was given at the time of the debt. So remember again, when mashkon is given at the time of the debt, that's where, again, we're unsure. Is that mashkon considered to be an actual form of repayment? Or is it considered to be just proof of debt? Okay, so keep that in mind. Ub'shomer aveda kameflagi. And they're arguing in the case of shomer aveda. Now, both say, now what's the case of shomer aveda? The itmar, shomer aveda. Now, both say, now, shomer aveda is exactly as it sounds, right? I'm walking down the street, I find a lost object. So I say, now what's talacha? I have an obligation of hashavas aveda, right? Returning lost objects. So now I pick up the object, I take it into my house. What's the shaila? What's my relationship to that object? So the Gemara says, Rabba Amar Shomer Chinam. Rabba says that I am like a Shomer Chinam, an unpaid custodian. Rav Yosef Amar Shomer Sachar. And Rav Yosef says, I am like a Shomer Sachar, a paid custodian. I both say, now why would I be a paid custodian? What's right? So Rashi says over here, Shomer Sachar. Rashi says one word, mitzvah. Mitzvah. Now I both say, now what? Now, again, it's not what you think. It's not what you think that since I'm performing a mitzvah, right, that's my schar. No, it means something actually a bit more technical. It means like this: osek b'mitzvah, patra min mitzvah. What I would say, right, we know there's a concept that when you're engaged in one mitzvah, you're patra from another mitzvah. So, for example, I will say, let's say I find the object, and at the time that I find the object and I'm taking care of it, an ani, a poor person, comes and asks me for tzedakah. What's talacha? Technically speaking, I'm pater. Since I'm involved in caring for the lost object, I'm pater from another mitzvah. You know, say that patur from the secondary mitzvah actually results in what? A cash savings. I would have given $5. Now I don't have, not that I don't have to give that $5. So I will say there is a financial benefit. So that financial benefit, the Gemara suggests makes me a shomer sachar. A shomer sachar, fascinating, no? So machlokes, shomer aveda, Rabbi says shomer chinam, Rav Yosef says shomer sachar. So I'll say, so just before we go on, take a look at the Rashi that says V'hacha b'shomer aveda kamiflagi. The time of the Rabbi Akiva mishum the shomer schar mitzvahu va'oseg b'mitzvah pata min mitzvah v'ibay lo yoav rifta la'anya. So I will say, so the Gemara is suggesting over here that halacha l'maisa, the same machlokes Rabbi and Rav Yosef is the same machlokes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer. That ultimately, again, why does Rabbi Akiva hold that you're a shomer sachar on a mashkon? Because technically speaking, at the time that I'm watching over the mashkon, if an ani comes and knocks on my door, and I will say, obviously, it only works if somehow you're actively involved in the mashkon, right? In other words, if the mashkon is sitting on my shelf, I'm not doing anything, you can't claim osik b'mitzvah patam min mitzvah. But for example, I'll give you a good example. If let's say again, Reuven lent Shimon $10,000 and Shimon collateralized his ox, and at the time that and Reuven is feeding the ox, and an ani comes and knocks on the door, so technically speaking, Reuven could say, I'm sorry, I can't give you any tzedakah right now. I'm involved in taking care of the mashkon. Osik b'mitzvah patam min mitzvah. That represents a cash savings, and therefore halacha l'maisa is a shomer sachar. So perhaps that's why Rabbi Akiva holds. That's why Rabbi Akiva holds that you're a shomer sachar. Ultimately, again on a mashkon. Why? What's the schar? What's the payment? The payment is I'm exempted from other mitzvahs. Rabbi Eliezer holds that you're a shomer chinam. That's what I'm trying to align over here. Lema to Rabbi Yosef Tanaihi. Shows that perhaps the position ultimately again of Rav Yosef is a machlokes tanoim. To which the Gemara says, "Lo, b'shomer aveda dukulei alma isud Rav Yosef." We'll say ultimately again, when it comes to a shomer aveda, when you're watching over a lost object, everyone agrees with Rav Yosef that you are a shomer sachar. Everyone agrees with that. So we'll say, so once again, so what's going on over here? V'hacha amud beis, v'hacha b'milveh sarich lemashkon kamiflagi. B'malveh sarich lemashkon kamiflagi. We'll say, rather, what's the case over here? It's very, very interesting. So we'll say, up until now, we've always looked at the mashkon as one of two things: either a proof of transaction or a potential source of repayment. The Gemara introduces a third possibility. Maybe we're talking about a case of where it's true, Reuven lends Shimon $10,000, Shimon gives Reuven a mashkon, but Reuven needs the mashkon. Look at Rashi. So ultimately, and so we're talking about over here where the lender himself needs the collateral. So now watch this. So now we're dealing with the following case. Reuven lent Shimon $10,000. Shimon gave Reuven collateral. So just give you a good example, right? Shimon collateralized his ox. Reuven needs the ox. Reuven has a field that needs to be tilled, and Reuven doesn't have an ox. So Reuven needs the ox. So now remember again, going back to our Ezu Neshach days, right? Is Reuven allowed to use the ox to till his field? Is he allowed to use the ox? Everyone's always nervous. Right? It depends. What does it depend? It depends on how you structure the transaction. So in other words, to get the full $10,000 plus the plowing usage of the ox, that you're not allowed to do. That's called ribis. That's ribis. What you can do is, which would actually work beautifully, is structure what we call a mashkanta desura, right? Where essentially, again, we look at the value of the service of the ox, and again, lock that into a yearly amount, and subtract that from the principal of the debt. That works beautifully. Or for that matter, again, what you could also do is, remember, mashkanta desura means at the end of the day you use the collateral in a way where the debt itself is worked down to zero. You don't even have to do it that way. As long as you're evaluating the service of the ox and subtracting that off the value of the debt, you're good to go. So Rabbi say, so now what do you do in a case like this where the lender needs the collateral? So Rabbi say, now watch this. Mar savar mitzvah ka'avid shehelvo v'havi shomer sachar. So Rabbi say, so one opinion says, and this is going to be Rabbi Akiva will hold like this. Even though the lender needs even though the lender needs the mashkon, at the end of the day, he's performing a mitzvah. Now we'll say, what mitzvah is he performing? Right, he's performing the mitzvah of lending money. Lending money is a mitzvah. And again, because he's still lending, so we'll say, even though Reuven needs the ox, it doesn't take away from the fact that he's still performing the mitzvah of lending money. So he performed the mitzvah of lending money, and therefore, again, I will say, then what? Osek b'mitzvah patam min mitzvah. So if at a time when he's taking care of the collateralized animal, right, and Ani shows up at his door and says, "Could I have $5?" Reuven has the ability to say, "I'm so sorry, I can't help you right now." Osek b'mitzvah patam min mitzvah. Therefore, again, he's still a shomer sachar on the collateral, even though he needs the collateral. Omar Savalav mitzvah ka'avid shalahana asa miskavein v'hamar shor mechinam. And the other opinion, i.e., Rabbi Eliezer will say no. In this case where he needs the collateral, so we'll say, therefore again, this is a self-serving act. He lent the money. So we'll say the way Rabbi Eliezer is looking at this is, why did Reuven lend Shimon the $10,000? Because Lamai said it's a nice way to help out, but what may be really driving him is the ability to get the use of the collateralized animal. So therefore again, Rabbi Eliezer will say, therefore it's not a mitzvah. So because it's not a mitzvah, if an ani shows up while Reuven is taking care of the collateral, what's the halacha? Reuven still has to give him tzedakah. We don't say osek b'mitzvah patam min mitzvah because you don't look at Reuven as being osek in a mitzvah. Why not? Because he's doing this is all being done for his own motivations, for his own benefit. Therefore, again, he's a shomer chinam on the collateral. So we'll say it's a very, very interesting way to frame this. Also interesting to see how perhaps the entire essence of a loan transaction changes when the lender dafka wants to use the collateral. According to Rabbi Akiva, the act of the loan is still termed a mitzvah because you lent another yid money without interest, right? According to Rabbi Eliezer, no, once it's really for your own motivations, that's no longer a mitzvah. It's nice, but it's not a mitzvah. Nafkamina, right? Significant practical difference. Can you claim osig b'mitzvah patam and a mitzvah when caring for the mashkon? According to Rabbi Akiva, yes. According to Rabbi Eliezer, no. So we'll say, what now? We need one core piece of information. What's our one core piece of information? I just want to know one thing. What is the level of responsibility that a lender has for a mashkon? Right? Remember again, this whole thing, life was so good a couple of days ago because we had a Mishnah. What did the Mishnah say? That the lender is a shomer sachar on the mashkon. That was it. Now suddenly everything's been blown wide open, and we see that this is not as pashat as the Mishnah made sense. How do we paskin? So as I said, Rambam says as follows. The Rambam says, and this is in Hilchos Schiros, Parakir Aloha Aleph. Hamal v'es chaver l'mashkon, bein shelva mos, bein shelva peros, bein shemil mishkano b'shas halva aso, bein shem mishkano achar halva aso. So it says the Rambam brings down all the cases, right? Reuven lends Shimon, whether Reuven lends Shimon money, whether he lent him peros, produce, whether the collateral was given at the time the transaction was made, or the collateral was given sometime later on. All the various cases, what's the halacha? Harei zeh shomer sachar. That's it. Just like the Mishnah. Right? So a lender is considered to be a shomer sachar, ultimately again on collateral. Whatever the loan item is, whenever the collateral was taken, halacha l'maisa shomer sachar. And I both say, now what is fascinating is obviously all these other cases do come up, like shomer aveda, fascinating stuff. But for our purposes, halacha l'maisa, lender's relationship to the mashkon is here shomer sachar. Beautiful. Let's go back to Abba Shalom Omer. Mutal adam lahaskim mashkon shal ani lios poches v'holech. So we'll say now watch this. Abba Shalom brought down the last case in the Mishnah. Right? Reuven lent money to Shimon. Shimon is poor. Shimon gave Reuven collateral. So what is Reuven allowed to do? Reuven is allowed to take the collateral that he received from Shimon and rent it out to others and use that rental income to essentially pay down the debt. So really what's happening over here is Reuven is helping Shimon to pay down the debt by taking Shimon's collateral and renting it out for others. Beautiful. Sabba Shal says you could do this. The Gemara says, Amra Chanan bar Ami Amr Shmuel halacha kabashal. The halacha is a kabashal. Both say now obviously this makes sense. Remember again about saying in this case, Reuven is doing a dual chesed. Right? What's his dual chesed? Chesed number one is what? Chesed number one. He lent Shimon money. Chesed number two, he's helping Shimon with repayment by renting out the collateral. But just an important qualification, v'af abashal lo amar ella b'mara upasal v'kardom hoil v'nafesh igraya v'zuta pechsayu. We'll say there's one caveat. What's the one caveat? This only works with items, Rabbi say, that generate a good rental fee and have low levels of depreciation, right? Which makes sense. So you're talking about things over here like a shovel or like an axe, where again you could get good rental fees, but the item still remains intact. Obviously, if by renting it out, the collateral is going to be significantly diminished, then you're not doing a toba for the ani, because then he's going to be left with nothing at the end of the day. Beautiful. Well, it says Kavai to Mishnah. This is a great case. Hamavir chavis mimakom lemakom v'shavra. Watch this. I would say Reuven asks me to move his barrel from location A to location B. I do it, and what happens? I break it. Not pshia. Well, actually, let me take it back. I break it. What's the halacha? Bein shomer chinam, bein shomer sachar yishava. So we'll say whether I'm a paid custodian, unpaid custodian, what do? I swear, I take an oath that I was not poshea, that I wasn't negligent, and I'm out. I'm not liable. Well, so you hear this? Whether I'm a shomer chinam or a shomer sachar, I take an oath that I was not negligent, and I am freed from further responsibility. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Zeh v'zeh yishava. Rabbi Eliezer is very interesting. The wording over here is very interesting. So first I'll take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, Shelo pasha v'yipater. Gemara mefarish taima, amai pater, shomer sachar b'shvua, ha-belav pshia nami chayiv, she'ein za'ones, ele ki gneva v'aveda she'krovel ones. So we'll say, so now, again, this is inherently problematic, because again, I understand why as a shomer chinam, I am freed from responsibility, but as a shomer sachar, why would I be freed from responsibility, even if it's not pshia? Okay, so I wasn't negligent, but I will say, but ultimately, again, a shomer sachar is still chayiv even for gneva v'avida. So I'd be patur. But okay, we'll see in the Gemara. Rabbi Eliezer says, zev zeh yishava. So what's this fascinating verbiage over here? Rabbi Eliezer says, I agree that in this case, both the shomer sachar and the shomer chinam swear that they were not negligent. V'tamia ani im yecholin zeh v'zeh lishava. Rabbi Eliezer says, I know that this is the halacha, but I just don't understand why. In other words, I understand how a shomer chinam exempts himself through a shvua. I don't understand how a shomer sachar exempts himself from it, right? Remember, a shomer sachar is chayiv on pshia. Obviously, everyone's chayiv on pshia, but he's also chayiv for gneva v'aveda, right? He's the only thing he's patur for is for ones. So Rabbi Eliezer is not disputing the halacha. He's just articulating how confounded and how befuddled he is by it. Okay, so let's analyze. Says the Gemara. Tan Rabbanon. Hamavir chavas lechaveram mimakom lemakom b'shavra. So we'll say, I'm moving Reuven's barrel from point A to point B, and the barrel breaks. So what's the halacha? Bein shomer chinam, bein shomer sachar, yishava. Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir holds that halacha l'maisa. Whether I'm a shomer chinam or I'm a shomer sachar, what do? I swear that I was not negligent, and ultimately, again, I'm freed from any further responsibility. That's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Huda Omer, shomer chinam yishba, no say sachar yishalim. Rabbi Huda says, no way. Shomer chinam, that works. Shomer chinam swear that you weren't negligent, you're freed from responsibility, but shomer sachar is absolutely responsible when he breaks the barrel. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, zeh v'zeh yishava. Rabbi Eliezer says both of them swear, shomer chinam and shomer sachar. V'tamia ani im yecholin zeh v'zeh lishava. But I don't know why. Like Rabbi Eliezer essentially is agreeing with Rabbi Meir, but he just doesn't understand the dynamic of what's happening over here. And I will say, now watch this. The Savar Rabbi Meir, Niskal Aposheh. So I will say, now watch this. This goes back to our Bava Kama days. Now I will say, so remember, we're going to now get into the sugya of Niskal Poshea. I will say, is tripping considered to be an act of negligence or not? I will say, so it must be that Rabbi Meir holds that tripping is not negligence. So we'll say, we're going to stop over here for today. We're going to pick up. So now we have our three-way machlokes. Rabbi Meir, both take a shvur and exempt themselves. Rabbi Huda, shomer chinam takes a shvur, exempts himself. Shomer sachar is chayiv. Rabbi Eliezer, I guess I agree with Rabbi Meir. I just don't understand it. And we're going to see that at the root of the machlokes, Niskal Poshe La Poshe. Is tripping considered to be an act of negligence or not? To be continued tomorrow. Shkoyach. Have a great day, everyone. Really good to see you.
He wants me to make an announcement?
That.
I don't understand.